Hello, WAP students, and welcome to the Chapter 36, Part 2 Flipped Classroom. And by Part 2, what I mean here is the second half of Chapter 36. Chapter 36 starts out talking about the Second World War and goes through the entire war and its aftermath, and then it begins the Cold War, and it takes us through the Cold War through the early 60s. So we're going to look at the beginning of the Cold War. You would think that, we'd be sick of the Cold of War by now, having just had a big world war, but no, we're not. We're not sick of it. So here we go. All right, the biggest ideas from this section are that, first of all, the Cold War begins just as World War II is ending, and it lasts almost 5 decades, so almost 50 years. And this war, as you may remember from U.S. history, is a contest, or basically a contest between the two superpowers that are left after the decimation of many economies in World War II. The Cold War changes the international landscape in terms of organization and alliances. So many organizations and alliances are created because of the Cold War or with the Cold War in mind. So thinking about, your strategy for being a participant in this Cold War, because during this time period, non-participation is not an option. This conflict also starts many conflicts around the world, and we're going to learn about three of them today. And also, as this is happening, technology and consumerism continue to develop, and this includes a massive arms race, but it also includes a move towards more nuclear power, which increased the amount of energy that people had available to them. And also, plastics made with polymers, made with oil, made it much easier to, and I'm going to change the color of this, much easier to buy consumer goods. One consumer good would be the record, a very, well, not a very popular, but an artist that I listen to sometimes, Father John Misty, has a line in one of his songs, try not to think about the staggering amount of oil that it takes to make a record, because a record is, of course, plastic, and plastics made owning stuff easier because it made things cheaper and faster to produce. So we see a lot of that happening during this time too. Okay, so what about that thing that was supposed to prevent war from happening? Oh yeah, the United Nations. And the United Nations, like if we look at, major conflicts around the world, you can say that their record is pretty mixed. But here from Wikipedia is the purpose of the United Nations. It's an intergovernmental organization, which means it's a bunch of different states, a bunch of different political actors, and their goal is to promote international cooperation. And it was supposed to be a replacement for the ineffective League of Nations, which really didn't work. And it was established on the 24th of October, 1945, in order to prevent another world war. And hey, we haven't had another world war, so I guess that's a success. And at its founding, the United Nations had 51 member states, and now there are 193. So it's only grown in membership, which I guess is another success. At the heart of the United Nations is this thing called the Security Council. And you might have heard about this because they are oftentimes in the news. Part of the the 5 permanent members of the Security Council with a rotating 6 member are the United States, the USSR, now Russia, Great Britain, France, and China. These were all the allies in the Second World War. So if you're ever wondering why those are the states that are part of the Security Council, it is because of that reason. So the United Nations was designed to set up peace between these two parties, but the or between the entire world. But the United States and the USSR had oppositional goals at this time. The U.S. and their allies, and the USSR and their allies, although they were allied in World War II, but moving on from there, the U.S. wanted to have free and fair elections in different states that had or areas that had been taken over by Germany as soon as possible. And Russia, at the Yalta Conference sounded like they were all for that, but they were really worried because number one, they were scared of Germany. And because they had fought Germany for many years without the support of any other allies on the mainland of Europe militarily. So they knew more than any other country what Germany was capable of. They, of course, lost millions of people in World War II, way more than any other country in Western Europe. They were also very suspicious of these allies for the exact same reason, because they had fought for years on the continent of Europe without help from Great Britain or the United States against Germany. And so Russia was really most concerned with having a buffer. They wanted a buffer between them and Germany. Now that's the Stalin's language. The United States, Churchill actually, called this an Iron Curtain. And the problem is that if you are going to have this buffer zone, then you're not going to have free and fair elections. So right from the get-go, these two parties were in opposition to each other. Also, they were superpowers. This means that they were economically the strongest economies, largest economies in the world. Politically, they had influence. A lot of people were moving towards their systems of government, whether it be a republic or communism. Culturally, also, they were dominant, especially the United States. And ideologically, again, these ideas of socialism or communism and democracy were very popular. Okay, so what exactly divides these two states? And I want you to pay close attention to this because there are political and economic divides ideologically, and a lot of times Americans will just lump those two things together, but that's not a good idea because that's not correct. So the United States promotes liberal democracy, a multi-party system, and they want free and fair elections to the degree that they can be held. They are also capitalist, which means they want a free market. These two things are not the same. Democracy is not the same as capitalism. They are two separate systems. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, wants one-party rule. Communists, right? Communists are the party. And they want communism to spread beyond the USSR. They want it to spread all over the world. And so we can have this international communist society where people are equal. They're not free, but they're equal. Well, at least under the Soviet system. Under earlier, ideologues, they would have been equal as well. So, geopolitically, the United States promotes this idea, first of all, by the Truman Doctrine. When the Soviets, take in all of those states, they're like, whoa, 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 not happening. We are going to protect people's right to be free. And that's the Truman Doctrine. They back that up militarily with NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and economically with the Marshall Plan, where they give aid to democracies. They say technically like that it can be anybody, but it's democracies, Western Europe. So they give aid to democratic governments. The Soviets do something similar. They set up satellite or client states who are funneling ideas back into funneling goods back into the USSR. They establish a defensive pact as well, the Warsaw Pact in 1955. And they establish, again, what's more of it's less aid and more client, like colonization style economic policies with Comecon in 1949. This means that those satellite states would be producing goods that the Soviet government demands, right? Because their economy and their economy is state run, and so they can basically say like, I want 10,000 refrigerators, or I want 40 cars, or whatever, and the state will have to provide it. So next, we're going to look at the conflicts that result from this geopolitical strategic positioning and from these differences in ideology.